Thanks to MCCI for making this actually happen, and I'll very quickly start and not waste a lot of time. I think we're already running for 10 minutes late, so also try to keep it short, right? So just okay. Anyways, we're going to lastly talk about consent management, right? And that's the idea. This session, which we'll try to keep it under 25 minutes. So to start with, I'm going to start with one thing because that's very important, and even though it's not related to consent management, I think it's something that we all have to understand and think about, which is the fundamental shift that the DPDP brings, right? Because prior to this, the way how we understood this ecosystem is we have data and how we use it. Right? Once you collect the data, once you have the data, and then you take a decision as to how do we use it, right? That's what's the thinking. Now, with DPDP, that fundamental thinking has to change. When I say what I mean that it has to change is, we have to think of data and purpose as one entity, right? That is the key thing that we have to think about today. Because if you have data anymore, can you use it for any purpose? The answer is no. And meaning, the data and purpose goes together as one unit, one set, and that is, something that I want to kind of touch upon. And also spend a couple of minutes to work as just put up a slide, our whole ecosystem in terms of the whole ecosystem that we built, and then start the session. So that was the idea. But in case you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I think there's a lot of questions, so happy to answer, to our extent. Whatever we've understood, we've interpreted. So I'm going back to the slide. So this is our ecosystem. Now the reason is we wanted to show this is the extent to which we've actually built it. So it cuts across 7 different modules that we have built, and this basically encompasses everything that you need in terms of being compliant with DPDP, right? So just wanted to showcase actually the length and breadth of what is there in DPDP and what we have built. This is our capability, right? So that was the entire element of kind of getting to this. So and we'll be here. My co-founder is here. We have team members, and we will be here. So in case you have any questions after this, please feel free to drop by and happy to have a chat, right? So I'll go straight in. So again, when we talk about consent managers, I think I'm going to cover 3 things. So under DPDP, what is a consent manager? Number 1. And number 2 is how do they fit into this ecosystem? Because now the new ecosystem, it's not something that we have been used to, right? It's the first time we are really started. So how is it going to fit into this let's say the architecture of privacy itself? Number 1. Number 2. And number 3 is what the organizations will have to prepare for. Again, these are the 3 things that we have put together. We are known for our unpopular opinions. I think that's going to reflect in the way how we talk about as well. That's why I want to start with, right? So on the left hand side, what you see is actually the definition from DPDP Act 2023. So basically, any person registered as a board. Again, I not read that because I think it's anyways visible. So I'll probably talk about the 4 important things that we have to remember for a consent manager, right? Point number 1, they are a regulated intermediary. So they are going to be regulated, they are going to be licensed with the DPP, Data Protection Board of India. So they are not data fiduciaries, right? So just to clarify that. Point number 1, that is the point number 1. Point number 2 is about they act very strictly on behalf of the data principle. So their incentive structures may be different, but what is that they have to act on is they are on the benefit of data principle. That is again something it's extremely important to understand. And the third point is they must be registered with the DPP, and they also have obligations and monetary penalties. When I say just regulated, I think it's not enough because we have been talking about privacy in India since IT Act in 2000, right? Because there existed clauses on sensitive data exposures and SDPAs have been here in the market. The reason why this time it's different is that we have an enforcer this time. Data Protection Board of India, in whatever form or shape it is to be set up. Keeping that aside, the law talks about an enforcement authority, a regulatory authority, which never was there in the past, right? And this time, that's why it's going to be different. And the consent managers are also going to be having obligations, monetary penalties in terms of how they interact with the system, how they are going to be working with us, right? And the 4th point is about they have to be interoperable. So meaning there's going to be a bunch of consent managers. You may have 2 different bank accounts, 5 different insurance policies across your families, and you have a lot of e-commerce portals, so there's going to be like one person having 20 plus different at least touch points, right? I mean, minimum I'm saying. So India has easily over 80 crore people with digital touch points. Now, these systems, these concern managers have to be interoperable. So see, these are the 4 points that I get to take away in terms of, how you understand a concern manager. So this is where we will start with, right? And I'm quickly jumping into the next one, so feel free to stop me if you have anything to discuss. So key obligations of concern managers. So the rules, and the final rules that came out on November 2025 sets out 13 different pointers. We have captured some of them here, but it's important again for us as well and for you as well to understand it. The first point that we have to stress upon is consent lifecycle management. Provision as in providing the consent, withdrawing it, all the everything revolving around the consent. That life cycle management would have to be done by the consent manager, right? That is the most important aspect, and that's why we have kind of put it on the primary aspect. Now there are a bunch of other things, and we have kind of captured what is more critical, right? So the second point is around audit trail. So no matter tomorrow anything that happens, or there's some kind of a dispute. How do you go back and prove that the consent has been provided, withdrawn, deleted, whatever be the scenario, it's going to be with the audit logs. So having those audit logs and in an immutable format is important, and concern managers have an obligation to maintain it for 7 years. I hope somebody was asking this question, I hope to clarify this. So it's there in the rule, it's under first schedule part 2B, you can check it in DPDP Act. DPDP Act's rules that came on November 2025. So the next point is about data blend operations. Now what I mean when I say that is, the concern managers are not going to deal with personal data, right? So now this, we have raised one question in terms of how can they be interoperable without having a single identifier. So that is something that has to evolve, but keeping that aside, they have to operate data blend. So they don't have to know or save any personal data. That is, again, something which is very important, right? So I'll talk about conflict of interest, and again, it's extremely important, and we have a lot of lawyers to do, so they can tell you about this. So briefly, any company that is working in a fiduciary capacity or a processing capacity for the same user, they cannot operate as a concern manager. So that is, very strictly mentioned as part of the obligations. Security safeguards, even though there is no personal data being stored, the concern managers have also been obligated to maintain reasonable security safeguards. We think it's largely interpreted as immutable logging, because somebody getting into the system could potentially tamper with the logging, and that should not happen, that cannot happen, and that is extremely important. And the next part is periodic audits. So this part again, it's still under involvement, but basically concern managers are going to have certain auditing obligations on the data fiduciaries that they serve to as well, or that they kind of work with. Now, what is going to happen here in terms of the structure? I think it's still yet to be evolving, because once the concern manager registration start, this will become even more clearer. And the final point, I kind of modified it because it's important to have this structure, is control independence. So the control, I think it's closely related to the conflict of interest, but there's put a lot of checks and balances to ensure that the concern manager's interest lies with the data principle, right? And why the method is that concern manager cannot be sold or merged without approval from the DPDP. Any company which it is serving to cannot hold more than 2% stake in the company. So these are all in place, are having put in place purely from the perspective of ensuring the controlled independence of concern managers. Right, so this is, there are 13 points like I said, but we have covered some of them in terms of what is more important in our opinion. But it's, I think it's all important for us to kind of understand this, right? So I think I've tried to capture the first 2 parts, which is what is concern manager and what are they going to be doing and how they kind of exist in the ecosystem, right? So the next part is around the confusions, because we talk to a lot of people, right? Organizations, mid, large, extra large, legal partners, big 4 consulting firms. So there's certainly a confusion around what is a concern manager and what is the role that they're going to be playing, right? So, and that is where we wanted to kind of, voice out our opinions. So these are all our opinions in terms of how we are interpreting it, we are understanding it, and it is up for scrutiny by all of you, right? That's the idea. So many organizations believe consent managers will actually replace internal consent systems, and the answer is no. So the consent manager is an external entity, regulator, and they will not be responsible for the internal consent systems. It has to be built by the organizations. We'll talk about that in detail, point number one. And point number two is that some assume that they should build internal tools from scratch. Again, to an extent, it is true, but then there is, an option to get out of this as well. And largely, that others are passively waiting for regulatory clarity. So basically, they're not doing anything, right? They're just waiting for consent mandates to be approved, registered by November 2026, and then start our work. So that doesn't work as well, in our opinion, and we'll talk about why. So to put it, simply, consent managers are largely about transmitting consent and also managing the life cycle of it, but they do not govern internal consent, right? From a data fiduciary point of view, they do not do an internal governance. So that is still the responsibility of data fiduciary. This is what I want to kind of, start with. So this is how we see the ecosystem, kind of evolving, right? So this is a consent architecture. So basically, it has 4 layers, right? On top sits the data principal, the person whose personal data it belongs to, right? They're the owner of their personal data, so they are the principal legally, and they own it, right? Number one. Number 2 is where we come in. We are like a consent manager, just to clarify. So we are a regulated intermediary. Now, do we directly connect to the data fiduciary's internal applications? I think it's not possible today because of the way how DPDP is structured, right? So they have to have an internal layer, a layer which is internal in nature. That is what we are calling it as an enterprise privacy infrastructure. So this is an internal governance layer. This internal governance layer is where we will, integrate with, and that is, going to be ensuring that across all the applications that the company has, across all the users, whether they have consent, can it be processed, should it be deleted, is the consent withdrawn, should I not be processing anymore? All these questions will be answered to the internal systems by a machine readable consent mechanism that will be internal, and that is the internal governance layer. Now, actually the question largely is, should the DFs, the data fiduciaries, build this in-house or buy it outside? If you ask me honestly, buying it outside doesn't work. Why? Because nobody understands your application, your infrastructure better than you. So the internal governance layer has to be built by the own organization, which is going to be using it. That is where I'll kind of pause here. So again, I want to reiterate the idea of consent management, right? So we did see this. I'm going to again redo this. Number 1, we are an regulated intermediary. Number 2, we work on behalf of data principals. Number 3, we are going to be basically interoperable. We did speak about it. And number 4 is, we have obligations, we have legal license, and we have monitoring penalties if we don't do our job right. So I'm just reiterating the role before I get on to the idea. So I think the next question that I want to probably talk about, and a lot of people ask us, is should you select or integrate a multi-year contract with the consent manager today, because there are no licensed consent managers in the market. There is not a single one in the market, because the DPP is yet to be set up, and DPP is the entity that will issue these licenses. So that is where we are today. And like I said, we are consent manager, but our answer is still low. Don't don't have a multi-year contract with the consent manager today, but that does not mean, we have to take everything, we have to push everything aside. So we have our own recommendations in terms of what has to be done. I think we will come to that. What are the things that you have to prepare for our meeting? So the first thing I would, talk about is, like I said, we have to build that internal governance layer. And when you do that, it's not easy to, build it internally, right? So you need a consent manager. You can take it on a short-term basis, either a POC or a 6 months contract, till the time, you're going to have another CM in place, because we are the people who is going to ultimately connect with you, right? So, and we all have standards. It's going to be interoperable, right? I said, if you remember, every one of us is going to be interoperable, meaning all of us are going to have very similar tech stacks, very similar API integrations. So, you have to prepare something, right? And what are the things that you can prepare for? I mean, I'm going to do simply two things. One is, you build your internal governance layer, number one. And number two is, get ready to integrate with any concern manager who will be tomorrow licensed. So, get ready for that today, because even though, I mean, it's not ideal, but that's the way how the timelines have been defined. So I think we have to deal with that, and it has its own set of difficulties, challenges, but I think start closes today. I think that will give the reality picture than talking talking about it in boardrooms or meeting rooms, because get to execution state today, the reality will be very clearly visible, and we can do that through POCs. And I think it's important that every company starts this, right? So this is kind of where we would like to voice our opinion in terms of how it has to work. So it's a very complex ecosystem, right? I mean, I just want to share it, but then again, I don't know if we have enough time to do this, but briefly. There's bunch of aspects. So your concern manager, like I said, first thing is data and purposes are going to be together. They are not separate entities. Data and purpose has to sit together always. And probably with concern, another third piece, that are you having concern for this purpose or not? That's again going to be a third element that is going to sit on top of it. So the way how this works is, it's slightly complex. I mean, I try to keep things together. You have an expiry period because there's data retention importancy, and you will have recurring use cases, right? I mean, business use cases, not legitimate use cases, because legitimate use cases are exempted under Section 17. So we're not talking about that, but business use cases which are not exempted and you take a consent, there has to be, expiry based handling. Then we have processing activities, which is more legal language in terms of what is going to be written. That is where the lawyers come in terms of defining what is the right language to write to the user in terms of when they see the notice, what do they see as a legal language. Then the purpose definition is more of a business definition, very easily understandable by everybody, because it has to be understandable by everybody, because the last time it has to be clear plain language as well. So we have the option to have both, which is you don't have the legal language, you don't have the legal language. What you want to use, how you want to use is up to you. And it's a slightly intrusive system in this sense, because every time there is going to be a correction point, there has to be a notice in place. And in fact, I'll probably jump one point and move on, say, we first have to actually understand the difference between a consent and a notice, because both are actually different entities. So notice is required even for legitimate purposes, and notice is just informational in nature. Consent is a notice plus a clear affirmative action. Somebody coming and saying that I agree, I approve, I consent, right? So, and where is that required? I mean, there are use cases, right? Like I said, legitimate use cases, business use cases, one-time use cases. So, bunch of other aspects which kind of takes a role in terms of how this works. So, the consent repository is where the internal governance layer will have to pick from in terms of how it builds the internal systems. So, the way how we see the future consent operations is there's going to be a standardized consent artifact exchange. We work with hundreds of companies, thousands of companies. It's going to be standardized, number one. And number two is there's going to be APIs for deep consent management integration. So any consent management you take, the company on their side has to have like you can think of it like a plumbing connection, right? You have to have the connection, only then you can come and fit into this consent manager. Now, if you don't even have the plug, in your organization, you have to create it. You have to start today and create it, because without that, even if you bring in a concern manager, you don't know where to fit them. You don't know, should I fit it, where to fit it? The answer would be, I don't know. That is where it would stay. And propagation of rights, requests, propagation of concerns is extremely important. We help collect it, we help, manage it, but how does it actually propagate into the data fiduciary's internal systems, right? That is extremely important, and that is something that the data fiduciaries have to start thinking about today, should have to start building about today. So, I'll skip this. So, I'll start finally close with one line and take questions. So, collecting consent is actually easy, because it's all, laid down to the law, it's not laid down to the rules. But proving governance of consent is the actual challenge. It's a real challenge that data fiduciary space to it. So I'm going to skip the other slides, but in case you have any questions, we can discuss.
I have series of questions.
Okay.
It's very confusing, most of all.
In order to oversimplify and understand, correct me if I'm wrong. So we are talking about different pieces here.
Yeah.
There is a API gateway or some gateway of sorts at the client side, for example. And then comes the concern management product.
Right.
And then this goes and talks to the portal that is actually going to be accessed by the data principal.
It's for everybody external. You can assume it like concern manager is going to be for everybody external, be it data protection code, data principal, anybody outside, right? I mean, you can keep it like that. And whatever you're building inside, internal, you're going to mirror some parts of it. That is for internal governance. So, from a data fiduciary perspective.
Again, question. So, we are talking about this consent governance. Is it going to be sitting in this concern management product layer, or is it going to, because the APIs from the, let's say I have an SAP system, right? I use it for my ERP. Everything is there, including the notices and all. So, whatever happens in this middle, this system is going to be the engine that is going to make everything happen, right? So, what I'm
not everything. So, will help you connect a consent life cycle, right? See, for example, I'll just give a very basic example, for all of us. Right? So, let's say, you're making a transaction, and when you make a transaction, you always get an SMS, maybe SMS is a legitimate use case, but let me put it like this. So, let's say you're applying for a credit card, or a savings account. Now, when you apply for a credit card or a savings account, when you submit the application, obviously there has to be a consent notice. And the consent notice has to be prepared in as per the legal fashion that is defined in the law and the rule. Now the question is, you have collected the consent, okay, through the consent manager. The consent manager has passed on it to you, right? I mean, you are the data fiduciary. Now you have the consent record, right? And you have all the information for the submitted application of credit card. Now, whether you're going to process the application or not process the application actually depends upon your system understanding whether the consent record says is it been accepted or says it has been rejected.
So that means there has to be system changes in the system of record, let's say SAP, in this case.
Yes.
So there is a notice that was sent through the CM. And then the fiduciary, the principal consents.
Yeah.
The record returns back.
Yes.
Comes back through the API into the SAP system.
Yes.
There has to be a way for this system to understand that consent has been obtained.
Yes.
And then move forward.
Correct.
Okay. So if I am an enterprise that is going for the consent management implementation, okay, all that I have to do is build the API gateway along with provisions in my system to send and receive and accept it or process the consent that's received. So, I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, see, okay, the real challenge comes in because in a larger enterprise, you would be processing on a daily basis thousands of, or rather crores of lines, right? So, because everything is a processing, a credit card is a simple example, but even if you get credit cards for larger banks, they get somewhere in the range of 50,000, 60,000 applications per day, right? But then when we talk about every other use case, so how many accounts they open up, in the insurance case, how many, claims that happens, reimbursements that happens. So everything is a processing. Everything that happens is a processing. And when you see all the processing that happens at a data fiduciary level, it's going to be very significant. And the number of touch points where you have to connect this internal governance system is going to be honest right now.
Overwhelmed, right?
Yeah.
So you are recommending to use a product rather than building this?
No, I would still recommend building it in-house because nobody understands your system like yourself. You will know where the connections are, right? What are the processing that happens. So a third party coming into the system, they first spend the 6 months figuring out where is what. So and only then they'll be able to. But again, we have our own blueprint in terms of how do you at least start building this internal governance layer. So companies that we work with, none of them have been ready. So we have built a blueprint that we are issuing to our companies that we work with in terms of start here at least and then slowly build your internal systems. So at least we give them a starting point.
So the other important point you just answered is that the data, consent data is actually stored by the fiduciary.
Personal data, yes. Consent is with us, personal data, yes. With the fiduciary.
Consent data stored by the
As
consent.
we use the force of proof for consent, personal data will be available with the data fiduciary.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a lot of questions, but I try to frame it in 4 of it. First is, why a data fiduciary cannot get consent on its own, like?
They can.
Exactly.
They can. They don't need us. Today, the law doesn't mandate that you have to use a consent manager because consent managers in India is an extremely new ecosystem. The DPP doesn't know whether there's even enough players like us who understand the system, right? So they're not going to mandate it on the first to go. It's our opinion, right? I mean, we have our opinion is that they first have to see that this is, I mean, consent managers can come, they understand it, they build it, they can make money, they have to survive. So all of this they will do, and only then they will at least consider or think about mandating consent managers, if that answers your question.
Yeah, so because if large organization where they have no more than 500,000 of employees and more than 5 million of shareholders and stakeholders, they will be able to collect it on their own. Why should they even go for a consent?
Because the complexity is involved, right? I mean, and also the interoperability standards that's going to be there, that's going to bite down on two
That
things.
was my second question. What is that interoperability you are referring to?
So the way how you have, I mean, you can think of it like this. I mean, it's very difficult to visualize, but I'll try. If you have used SI and DigiLocker, and if you have used SI you can think of it like a marriage between these two and a consent marker equivalent coming up in the future. So you're going to have, as a user, you are going to have across all the fiduciaries your consents available in one place.
Okay, so it's a common platform.
That's the expectation.
Okay, common database where a data principal gives consent. Many data fiduciaries can access that.
It's given and it's available there. So tomorrow you want to see whether you have provided, whether you want to withdraw, delete, all of these options will be available in the centralized platform.
That brings to my question that consent should be linked to a purpose.
Yes.
So you can't have a blanket consent
Correct.
for multiple purposes.
Correct.
So when a data principal gives a consent to the consent manager, he doesn't specify what purpose.
They do. They will have to.
Okay.
Going forward, the blanket consents.
Purposes.
Yes. Yes. It's going to be. I mean, the notice. We can. I mean, if you have internet, we can show you. But I can. Okay. I'll see if I can. I'll have it in this.
So do you have a common identifier?
This is sample notice.
Okay, just one question on that. See, I can change my consent manager anytime. Right?
Yes, you can.
So, in terms of the records that you're going to maintain on what page,
Yeah.
we also an API between consent managers,
Yes.
right? Now, which means all of this entire messaging has to be in a standard format.
Yes.
So, you will have a taxonomy, something like a 8583 ISO.
There will be minor okay. So from a first level parameter perspective, it's all going to feel the same, and we don't have a standardization today yet. So I mean, on this actual behalf, maybe ran a code for challenge for consent managers through NECD, National E-Governance Division. They have taken up a lot of consent artifact. They're still going through them. They're still yet to define what a consent artifact is going to look like tomorrow. But yeah, you're right. 99% in terms of how it's going to work, it's going to be similar across all the consent managers.
Okay, so which means even the application that you're now building has to be re-engineered once the standards come.
So, it depends on how you build the architecture. So, we have it in a very flexible modular format, and we've thought about how, we exchange codes between consent managers, right? In terms of how we are looking at it as an artifact. So, we still have to make changes, there's no doubt. But the amount of changes that we have to make will be lower in our opinion. Will be lower now.
Okay, so in case of a nomination,
yeah,
and dealing with you will be the important because let us say that the
yes.
database doesn't exist anymore. So the nominee again will be registered with you, right?
Yes. So nomination is completely through consent manager. So and in any consent manager, that would be the interesting part. So let's say there are 5 consent managers in India, and go to any of them and do the right nomination.
Okay, just one more. Let us say consent manager fails. The entire database, is it also available with the board or somewhere else for somebody else to access?
Likely not today, but again, like I said, we're going to license, so we will have certain requirements around, how do we manage our tech stack? Do we have a DR in place, RPOs and so on? But yeah, so there will be safeguards around that in place.
It's still not there, that's it.
It's still not there, yeah.
Okay.
Replying to this question, you were talking about periodic audits. So who will be auditing the
Concerned manager will be audited by the data protection board.
DPP? And they will have to submit reports to the DPP.
So, there will be a separate arm of DPP that handles the concerned managers. So, who will be auditing us, right? So, because the law clearly states the licenses could be revoked. One of the penalties could be levied on concerned managers if the obligations are not being met.
And as a data principal, how will the data principal know that you are a consent manager? Of course, the data fiduciaries may have, but as an individual, how will a data principal?
So, there are ways because it's all, the last one digital now, but I'll explain this. So, one is if anyways go to DPP, they are going to provide a list of all the registered concern managers. And two is you go to the data fiduciary, somewhere in their privacy policy rights that you will find who is a concern manager. And three is ideally when you provide the notice, somewhere you will be able to find who is a concern manager, who is let's say enabling this notice. But yeah, you have avenues to find about. It will be public information. You may have more than one, but you don't have to go to different ones in terms of handling your data. So they will all have everybody's data in a sense.
So your agreement will be with the fiduciary or the postal?
Yeah, that is, that's an interesting question today because today how the market is getting aligned is, since the requirement or the integrations are actually quite extensive. It cannot be like a plug-in, plug-out approach today. So it's going to be with the organizations. But like I said, the DPP is going to keep us in line. DPP is going to keep us in line, even though data fiduciaries will be the one paying for this integration.
One last question, please. Yeah, please.
Okay. So I'm trying to visualize the solution. Okay, I'm the data principal.
Yeah.
Okay, and your customer manager
Yeah.
in the middle, and the
Data fiduciary also.
on the other end. From my perspective, from the data principal perspective, in my dashboard, I will be able to see the consent status of
Correct.
all the consents that either I have given to my bank
Yes.
or the e-commerce sites
Yes.
or the social media sites, right? On the other end, individual, the bank, the social media site, the e-commerce, they will be able to manage and see all the consents of all the customers,
Correct.
right? So here it is a microwave, here it is a macro. Is it right?
Yeah.
That is how we can visualize.
Yes.
So what is the key identifier of a data principal?
So we are largely leaning towards mobile number.
By numbers.
So TRAI is looking at ensuring mobile numbers are not reassigned in less than 5 years now. So that the consent issue hasn't come into picture. But even then, today everybody is leaning towards mobile number as the one metric.
What other?
We still have to wait and watch what happens, but I'm just sharing our opinion. So because we don't want any sensitive information to be a leaker.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
because it's going to be, we are not government entities, it's all going to be private entities. So if you have any sensitive information as a leaking ID, so it could potentially be, it's not secure if I have to be aware. So
Thank you.
who will do?
Who is in charge?
Data fiduciaries.
Mr. Yuvraj, I'm sorry, ma'am. So we have, yeah, so he's going to be